The bill is passed.
Two controversial bills passing in the House. One would shake up the election process across the nation, and the other is a police reform bill. Now, Republicans are pushing back against both. President Biden is weighing in on states rolling back mask mandates and opening up their economies. He says it's a big mistake to end safety measures too soon. And a big shakeup in the digital ad world. Google announced it won't build new tools to track users around the internet. And Facebook lifts its ban on political ads today. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. The National Guard may stay in the Capitol for 2 more months. Capitol Police are requesting today the National Guard stay be extended for 60 days. They cite concerns over security since the Capitol breach on January 6th. According to the Associated Press, defense officials say the Pentagon is currently reviewing the request. Michigan Representative Alyssa Slotkin says she learned about the 60-day extension request, adding that the National Guard is now seeking volunteers from states around the country. The over 5,000 troops currently in D.C. are set to go home on March 12th. The troops come with a hefty price tag. Back in February, Michigan Congresswoman Lisa McClain and other House Republicans asked House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to explain the reasoning behind keeping the troops in D.C. McClain told Fox News that the only briefings she and her colleagues have had on this issue were through the media, saying the troops may be here to stay until the fall. McClain said she asked Pelosi for a briefing as to why they need the troops here for so long, but she says they've received zero information. Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said at the time the estimated cost for the National Guard protection at the Capitol complex through March 15th will cost nearly $500 million in taxpayer money. And the House of Representatives has canceled its Thursday session. This comes amid fears a militia group could be plotting to breach the Capitol. Some online rumors have claimed Donald Trump would be restored as president on that day, as March 4th was the previous date of presidential inaugurations. That changed in 1933 with the passage of the 20th Amendment. Since then, inaugurations have been held on January 20th. Capitol Police said in a statement that intelligence shows a possible plot to breach the Capitol by an identified militia group. The agency added that it is prepared for any potential threats towards members of Congress or towards the Capitol complex. An intelligence bulletin also mentions May 20th as a potential date connected with the rumors. Joe Biden has yet to announce a date for his State of the Union address, but the bulletin says that could also be a problem date. Now let's turn to 2 controversial bills that passed in the House late Wednesday. One is H.R.1, or For the People's Act. The bill would make many of the election reforms introduced last year amid the pandemic into permanent federal law. Such reforms would affect the process of the election. Examples include mail-in voting, as well as early and absentee voting. Minimal verification for voter registration. People would be able to automatically be registered, as well as register online or same day, removing a lot of the verification currently in place. Other changes would affect the political side of the election process, such as making states establish independent commissions for congressional redistricting, which restructures the Federal Election Commission from a bipartisan into a partisan majority rule campaign regulatory agency. That creates widespread new restrictions on the freedom of speech during campaigns. Under the bill, campaign funds from corporations requires donor disclosure of religious and nonprofit advocacy groups. This would let incumbent congressmen and their challengers get a salary from campaign funds. Late Wednesday night, the House passed the bill by a hair. No Republicans voted for the For the People Act, and 1 Democrat joined them in dissent. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said at an event that the bill combats special interest money in politics and supports the American people. Critics of the bill say it formalizes the controversial practices that led to allegations of voter fraud in the 2020 election. Democrats rejected every Republican amendment to the bill. The Biden administration says the bill is needed to protect the right to vote. But the bill makes voting procedures favor the party in power and makes it easier for non-citizens to vote. The bill is already seeing pushback among Republicans. 20 Republican attorneys general calling on the leaders of the U.S. House and Senate to consider a number of constitutional flaws in the bill. They wrote in a letter, as introduced, the act betrays several constitutional deficiencies and alarming mandates that, if passed, would federalize state elections and impose burdensome costs and regulations on state and local officials. They note that under the U.S. Constitution, control of presidential elections falls to state legislatures. They state in the letter the act would invert that constitutional structure, commandeer state resources, confuse and muddle election procedures, and erode faith in our elections and systems of governance. Adding, accordingly, members of Congress may wish to consider the act's constitutional vulnerabilities as well as the policy critiques of state officials. According to the letter, a number of other provisions in the bill also appear to contradict the Constitution, such as requiring states to accept late ballots, overriding state voter identification laws, and mandating states conduct redistricting through unelected commissions. They go on to say, despite recent calls for political unity, the act takes a one-sided approach to governing and usurps states' authority over elections. With confidence in elections at a record low, the country's focus should be on building trust in the electoral process. The extent of the bill prompted House Rules Committee Ranking Minority Member Tom Cole to remark during the debate that this is a bill that's about preserving the present Democratic majority. It is a bill by the majority for the majority and is intended to entrench the majority in power for years to come. In 2019, a nearly identical bill passed the House. It went nowhere in the then Republican-controlled Senate. This time around, the bill's fate is less certain, as the Senate is split evenly between the two parties, leaving Vice President Kamala Harris to break ties. But if Republicans filibuster the proposal, as seems likely, Senate rules require 60 votes for it to pass. The second bill that passed in the House late yesterday is a police reform bill. It's also sparking controversy among Republicans.
The bill is passed.
The police reform bill, named the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, narrowly passed the House along party lines. A similar version of this bill already passed the House last August, but stalled in the Senate. Now it's off to the Senate floor for a second try. One Republican Texas representative, Lance Gooden, originally voted for the bill, then later called it an accident because he pressed the wrong button. He changed his vote in the official record to reflect his opposition. Gooden shared a photograph of himself holding a piece of paper titled Personal Explanation, in which he said he intended to vote no. He went on to say, I have arguably the most conservative America First voting record in Congress. Of course, I wouldn't support the radical left's anti-police act. I have changed the official record to reflect my opposition. According to GovTrack's ideology score, Gooden is the 36th most conservative representative. Democrats argue that the bill is necessary to improve policing. The co-author of the bill shares her motivation for writing it, saying it is to raise the standards of policing in America and also to transform the culture. The bill would ban no-knock warrants, require police agencies to provide data on deadly force, and restrict funding to local governments that allow chokeholds. Texas Representative Sheila Jackson Lee says the bill targets only police who engage in misconduct. But Republicans say the bill goes further than just restricting police use of force. Another controversy in the bill is changing qualified immunity for police, making it easier to sue police for excessive use of force. Critics of the bill say it would make communities less safe and endanger the lives of law enforcement officers. For the bill to pass in the Senate, 10 Republicans would need to get on board. This comes just ahead of the March 8th trial for Derek Chauvin, the former police charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter in Floyd's death. The Biden administration showed support for the bill and encouraged the House to pass it. Now let's turn to another area of controversy, states lifting mask mandates. Some people are all for it, others not so much. Texas, Mississippi, and other states are opening their economies and easing the virus restrictions. President Biden criticized the move.
And the last thing we need is the Neanderthal thinking that in the meantime everything's fine, take off your mask.
Texas is one of the states that has opened its economy. Texas Senator John Cornyn says it is not up to Biden to tell his state what to do. He says states are choking their economies with unnecessary rules that don't increase safety. He says these same states can't pay their bills anymore. When Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced he was opening the state, he said Texans know how to keep safe, and they should have the freedom to choose how to do it. Cornyn said people could follow the guidelines voluntarily, saying for those who want to wear a mask, they still can. Biden, meanwhile, says vaccines are making a difference. He says there will be enough vaccines for every American by the end of May. Now let's turn to the digital world. A lot happening in big tech. Facebook is now allowing political ads again starting Thursday. This comes after the company banned them to combat misinformation surrounding the presidential election. The company announced in a blog post on Wednesday it would soon reverse its months-long freeze on political, electoral, and social ads, which it first introduced to crack down on misinformation around last November's presidential election. Meanwhile, Google, which reinstated their own pause on ads following the deadly January 6th siege of the U.S. Capitol, lifted theirs last week. But they faced criticism from both Democratic and Republican strategists, who argue that such bans were overly broad and failed to combat the issue of organic misinformation on the platforms. Earlier on Wednesday, the Democratic congressional and senatorial campaign committees issued a statement, which criticized Facebook for not communicating a clear date to end the ban, saying the freeze had made it harder to reach voters. In its blog post on Wednesday, Facebook said that its systems do not distinguish between political and electoral ads and social issue ads, and added that it would look at further changes to its advertising policies in the coming months. And in a big move yesterday, Google announced it's phasing out the practice of letting companies track users across the web using cookies by next year. Web cookies are small pieces of data that are used to keep track of your online activity. Advertising giants like Google and Facebook rely on these cookies to a certain extent. Google cited its commitment to protect privacy, reaffirming it will eventually retire third-party cookies and will no longer create new tools to track users' browsing history. Google's Director of Product Management, David Temkin, wrote in a company blog post, "Today, we are making explicit that once third-party cookies are phased out, we will not build alternative identifiers to track individuals as they browse across the web, nor will we use them in our products." He went on to say people shouldn't have to accept being tracked across the web in order to get the benefits of relevant advertising. And advertisers don't need to track individual consumers across the web to get the performance benefits of digital advertising. He went on to cite a Pew Research Center study that found 72% of people feel that almost all of their online activities are being tracked by advertisers and tech companies, and 81% say they believe such data collection poses greater potential risks than benefits. He went on to say if digital advertising doesn't evolve to address the growing concerns people have about their privacy and how their personal identity is being used, we risk the future of the free and open web. Still, there are concerns about the tech giant's dominant power in online advertising, and the change won't affect Google's largest advertising moneymakers, Search and YouTube. And Google can still track users through its own services like Search or Maps. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.